Hey kids, this is Chef Jack with another edition of Marvel vs. DC. You all know the rules by now. Englentine and I have divided up every single comic book released by both DC and Marvel, and each week we review those new releases. We give each book a score of 1 to 5 stars, and at the end we average out the points, and the publisher with the best average score is the winner for that week. With all that said, let's get this party started. The 1-star books. These are the worst. Not merely bad, but awful and horrendous. Avoid them at all costs. Marvel Universe Guardians of the Galaxy number 22. For a comic that's trying to be an overdone kids cartoon, this issue succeeds wildly. The story is only so-so, and we've seen it all before. The inept interrogator goes in to talk to a crook, and the crook uses the interrogator's utter incompetence to escape and wreak havoc. Only this time it's with superheroes, and I gotta tell you, superheroes do not turn boring into non-boring just by being superheroes. All it makes is boring plus superheroes. The art is still horrible, the action is still trite, and I've heard better dialogue in films by Ed Wood. This was just a horrible comic, and I know that they're not necessarily aiming it at my demographic. They're aiming it at the kids. But when I was a kid, I wouldn't have enjoyed this comic. Suicide Squad number 25. If you're a fan of the Suicide Squad like I am, you should be pissed the hell off about this issue. I mean that seriously. All this build-up, 2 years of build-up, leading to the final confrontation between the squad on one side and the people on the other, and it's all over in a handful of panels. The entire fight is over in a handful of panels. Not even the entire issue. It's like it's an afterthought. I wish I could say that I found a single redeeming feature somewhere in this book, but I can't. I just can't say it. It's a directionless mess. And once again, Harley Quinn's being overglorified to the point that there's no real reason for any of the rest of the squad to even show up. The title's beginning to feel like Harley Quinn's Superhero Hour. I mean, we get it. We get it. It's time to move on. Teen Titans number 12. I know this issue is a crossover for the Dark Knight's Metal event, but taken as a Teen Titans issue, this is a huge disappointment. We get a couple of panels with the team, and they aren't really together as a team in these panels, and then it becomes nothing but the annoying little shit show. I'm sorry, I mean the Damian Wayne show. This might not even be so bad were it not for the fact that this is supposed to be a team book, and none of Damian's teammates are here helping Damian with the Riddler maze. Every page in this issue just annoyed me more and more. Issues like this are why people are consistently complaining about crossover events and, forced tie-ins. It doesn't make for better stories. It just detracts from the regular series. It's a big problem, and, Marvel's sinking because of it, and DC needs to learn it. The 2-star books. These comics might be bad, but there's usually 1 or 2 things that save them from being truly horrible. Invincible Iron Man number 11. This book has multiple problems, most of which have absolutely nothing to do with it being yet another Riri Williams shill piece. Instead, it's a Tony Stark shill piece, which is really weird because most Iron Man readers are already aware of, just how fantastic a character Tony Stark can be. It's almost as if Bendis finally decided to try and cover his ass and walk it back from the Riri love and give us some Tony Stark love. It's complete filler, and it's the horrible kind of filler that just makes things worse. And anytime you have this many artists working on a single book, the inconsistency just becomes distracting. I have no idea what the point of this issue was. Honestly, I don't get it. Because it doesn't fit in any story. It doesn't seem like a carryover. It just seems like it sits there all by itself in the middle of the table, not really accomplishing anything. Monsters Unleashed number 6. This is an introspective dialogue-heavy issue that unfortunately is just mopey and oh woe is me, I have superpowers enough to make it a slog to read. The premise is that Kei Kawade is creating monsters because of outside influences and not because of an actual superpower. It's actually a pretty interesting premise, and it shows a lot of promise. And there are actually a couple of bits of dialogue that aren't so schmaltzy, but it it hits you over the head with this particular message like a sledgehammer. It's not subtle at all, and the action is paint by numbers, and the conclusion you can see coming a mile away. This series has always been troubled, and this issue's just more of the same. Oh, and spoiler alert, the cover is a complete lie. Fin Fang Foom does not show up in this book. Not at all. Spider-Man Deadpool number 21. Let me start by saying that this is undeniably the best issue in the series. Of course, the fact that it still only scored 2 stars with me should tell you what that means. I'm not even sure it's fair to review this title anymore. After all, this is the next to last issue, and after that it becomes Spider-Man versus Deadpool, and we get a whole new creative team, and I am using creative in air caps. This story is completely banal, and it's unexciting. I often say things are paint by numbers when they're boring, but this is as if you did a paint by numbers painting, and the only colors that you were allowed to use on your paint by numbers were gray, and gray, and more gray. I seriously cannot understand why they keep bringing Arcade back as a villain. He's just awful. The dialogue was horrible. There's nothing to like here. The one thing that kept it from being a 1-star book was the art, and that was okay. Venomverse number 2. So here we are, we're 2 issues deep into the Venomverse, and this title's appeal has shown itself to be completely superficial. Yeah, there are some cool visuals, and I've got to hand it the action-heavy approach. But apart from that, there's no there. There's no meat on the bone. It's like a soap bubble. It's cool to watch as it floats on by, but you know that it's made of nothing more than air. The various Venoms are uninspired, and they're uninspiring. The villains are bland, and they're one-note. Everything involved in this title needs more ambition shown, and we're just not getting it. It's like everybody involved is phoning it in just for the paycheck, just to get it over with. Why did they bother doing this? Oh wait, that's right, cash grab. The 3-star books. These comics are just average. They fall neither on the good end of the spectrum nor the bad. All New Guardians of the Galaxy number 10. After the wonderful last issue, this is a huge letdown. I mean, it's one thing to sidestep an action-packed finale when the occasion calls for it, but it's a whole other thing to have your 2 primary antagonists just, I don't know, hug it out. It wasn't interesting. It wasn't satisfying. The only part I enjoyed was Drax's loophole for his recent pacifism. That said, the characters were universally well written. The dialogue wasn't awkward, but it was irrelevant. I mean, who cares? And, also, this issue demonstrated the most obvious problem with attempting to shove the MCU into the comics. I hope all of you out there are wanting the Guardians to start the Infinity War story, because, hey, it's here now. Yay. Ms. Marvel number 22. This was a fight issue that actually had some pretty cool action bits in it, and I loved the thought of a legal injunction being brought against the supervillains and it actually working. Too often the courts and the police are seen as incompetent in the comics, and I think that's a problem. However, the biggest difficulty I had is that in this stage of the story, it called for more than just a shallow fight issue. Wilson didn't go far enough with the story, and she took an easy out. It should have been a huge deal for Kamala to reveal her identity to the bad guy, but it goes nowhere. Nowhere, especially in light of the fantastic setup we got in last issue. I mean, in this issue, Becky was reduced to, quote, crazy villain in a suit of armor, unquote, instead of the ideology-driven zealot she's been up till now, and nowhere in the implications of ordinary, where is the part about why these people were arming themselves to create a paramilitary force just to keep minorities down? Other than these guys are just evil, nobody looked into what the causes for that were. And I won't even get into the silliness regarding Lockjaw suddenly showing up and the magic Turkish food and the Deus Ex Machina both of them represent. It's lazy storytelling and it's way too shallow. Supergirl 13. I finished reading this comic and my first thought was, wait, that's it? It's over? Seriously, this issue races to the conclusion so fast that it comes as a surprise when the story actually ends. Art-wise, there's a lot of standout pages, especially the last shot of Supergirl in flight. But it's a bit frustrating to see how quickly the story arc just ends. I mean, we got this big build-up for, nothing really. The plot leaves us in an intriguing place, and it has a lot of potential, which is why I didn't rate this issue any worse. But it just feels rushed, and everything it comes off as, I don't know, inelegant, like somebody took a hammer and pounded this round peg into the square hole. It could have been done much better. Superwoman number 14. A lot happens over this issue's 20 pages. So much, in fact, that it feels like 2 or 3 issues were crammed together into a single book. Anytime an issue of a book that is sitting at the bottom of the sales charts feels this overstuffed, I begin to wonder if the writing is on the wall for it. The last bunch of issues have been entertaining and fun and definitely worth the read. But as a title overall, Superwoman needs some promotional love from DC, and it's not getting it. As a result, I'm honestly feeling like this one's about to go. This particular issue suffers from the breakneck speed that the creators are moving at. My guess is if Red Sun had been given 1 more issue and if Maxima had been given 2, Perkins, Segovia, and Tilbert would have been able to give us a fantastic story. Because, all the beats are here. They're just missing all the supporting details that they don't have room for. And that's never a good thing. Wonder Woman 77 meets the Bionic Woman, number 6. I gotta tell you, at first I had fun with this series because I grew up as a fan of both of these shows. I mean, Linda Carter was my first big celebrity crush, in fact. But these days it just feels like a chore. I mean, the writers definitely know the lore of the shows they're based on, but the heavy dialogue and the constant info dumping just slows everything to a crawl. I was actually hard-pressed to feel engaged by this issue, and in a few months I suspect I'm going to have forgotten ever reading it. It's just one of those kind of books. Yeah, okay, it's not bad, it's all right, it's got its moments, but you're not going to remember it. This is not anything. This is not going to be anybody's favorite comic book. So if you do like the show, go ahead and read it. If you never watch the shows, you don't have to. It's up to you. The 4-star books. Now we're getting to the good stuff. These are the comics we can actually recommend. Green Lanterns number 31. So this is the conclusion of the Out of Time storyline, and the payoff was pretty good. The climax is a bit predictable and not completely satisfying, but an honest effort that still felt better than not. Simon and Jessica can no longer fall back on the excuse of being rookies, and it's nice to see that the pair of them, actually stepped up. Humphreys is getting really good at conveying emotion, and that might be the level upon this issue worked the best. The artwork continues to be absolutely magic, and I can't see it failing anytime soon either. It felt alive in some places, which is what this issue required, seeing as it was so action heavy. Also, the new assignment for Simon and Jessica is intriguing, as it does give us an excuse to go back to good old-fashioned superheroics. Jessica Jones number 12. Sometimes the frustrating thing about this title is the slow pace. It's been a year, and Jessica really should have solved more than 2 cases by now. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's been an enjoyable ride. It's just, I've continually been expecting just a little bit more. Luckily for us, this issue does assemble more than a few of the various puzzle pieces that Bendis has been throwing down on the table for us. And we're finally beginning to see why it's been taking so long to get to the point. In addition, the characterization really stands out, especially the gradually self-repairing relationship between Jessica and Luke. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Jessica Jones, which has always been on the crushingly depressing background of the star character, it's always relied on that, it's taking a more hopeful tone. And personally, I think that's a good thing. Luke Cage number 5. Okay guys, where the hell has this story been for the last 5 issues? It's the end of the first story arc, and holy hell, it was precisely what I'd been hoping for since the beginning. This is an all-around solid issue with great action, some appropriate drama, some interesting decisions being made by characters that come as a true surprise. The grim ending fits completely into the story. That said, there are some narrative problems. The reason why Burstein faked his death makes no damn sense. Neither does Warhawk's continued survival. The guy was stabbed in the chest like 19 times over the course of the last 3 issues. He should be dead by now. The art is still too static and sterile feeling for me. And lastly, there are a lot of race and class subtext here, and as opposed to a lot of the SJW bullshit found in other books, it would make sense if they actually included it and explored it within this story. But it just goes completely ignored. And that was a waste of a good opportunity. But overall, this was a fine issue, and I'm looking forward to the next one. New Superman number 15. The insane events of the past few issues come to a head in this issue, and then they come to a head again. And then there's a little bit of a lull, and then they come to a head again. You will not feel cheated by the price of this book because of all the stuff that's happening in it. But that's also why this book is only 4 stars and not 5. There were places where it feels overstuffed. Too many characters to keep track of. You lose track of what's going on. We never do find out what the hell the Suicide Squad was doing there, for example. I do think that this issue included just about every Chinese metahuman, both villain and hero, in the DC canon. But the story has come to an interesting turn, and I did like the final tribute to the old 1990s Death of Superman event. That was kind of interesting. But otherwise, this was a solid issue, for good and bad. If I had to, sum it up in one sentence. It was a solid issue. Scooby-Doo, Where Are You, number 85. As always, this is a two-story anthology, and while the stories are naturally simplistic, I mean, this comic is aimed at readers between ages 7 and 9 after all, they're still entertaining even for someone like me who has to look in the rearview mirror to see his 50th birthday. They both harken back to the original cartoon, which is the standard by which I always measure this comic. Does it remind me of an episode of the cartoon I loved when I was a kid? If yes, cool, I give it a great rating. And this one really does. And I gotta tell you, the second story adds Shakespeare to the mix is just icing on the cake. Again, if you're a grown-up, you probably won't be into this title, if only for the nostalgia's sake, because, these are not complex stories. But if you've got a kid and they're just starting to read, this is one that I highly recommend. Teach them to read using comics. That's how my kids learn to read. It's a good thing. The 5-star books. These books are the best of the best, at least for this week. These are the ones that we recommend the most. Iron Fist number 7. This issue is just high-octane action from start to finish, and that's how it should be. This is wall-to-wall martial arts action, including one of the most magnificent 2-page fight scene spreads I have ever seen. It's honestly, it seems like Ed Brisson just sat back and let the tale tell itself. The plot's pretty simple, but it's exciting, and it just works. There's nothing really done wrong here. The coloring is great. The pacing is great. The construction of the panels are all great. It occurs to me that this is how the Netflix series should have been, but wasn't. If you're not reading Iron Fist, you're losing out. This is an amazing comic. It's an amazing title. It hasn't been, since it restarted, it's been one of the best Marvels produced. I know that's not too difficult, but still, it's the one that should keep you coming back to Marvel. Mr. Miracle number 2. My notes for this issue reads, God, this was perfect. And then I realized that there wasn't a lot more than I could say. I mean, Mr. Miracle number 2 is even more cinematic than the first issue. The panel progression and the art changes are perfect. There isn't a lot of dialogue dump on you, but that's fine. You don't need it. I love the family drama here with Mr. Miracle's quiet rebellion regarding Orion assuming the throne of New Genesis, a throne that rightfully should be Scott Free's. And then there's the end, that little shocking revelation dropped on us by Granny Goodness. As a paranoia-inducing lie, it's exactly what Granny Goodness would say to cause trouble. But here's the thing. she's just as likely to drop this bomb and have it be utterly true, because that causes just as much trouble. So I've got to go back to my notes. God, this was perfect. Rocket number 5. So we're getting to the end of the Blue River score, and Rocket has a plan that sounds like it came out of some 70s crime thriller. The prose is purple. The art is the right balance between the dark look of some of the Marvel street-level books and the cartoony look of the Guardians. It just sings as an issue. There's even the construction of the story, the panel arrangement, the points of view, as it were, if this was a camera. It begins at the end and then expands outward and then zips ahead. It's all brilliant. It's utterly brilliant. So far, this is the best issue of this series to date, and I really cannot wait for the next one. And that's the best part of a median issue. If you can't wait for the next one, it's done its job. Shade the Changing Girl number 12. Okay, I have no idea how this happened. For most of the run of this series, I have hated having to read this title. It was badly written, nothing made sense. It seemed to be completely random. The last 2 issues, however, have been amazing. Why do they keep this good stuff for the last? This issue deals with life, and it deals with death and the human condition and dreams and reality and love. And it's all from an outsider's perspective, and it does so by dragging the reader kicking and screaming into it. This was a gorgeous issue, and it was poignant, and it spots, it was breathtaking. And that's a marked improvement over the Dada-esque, yes, that's a word, look it up kids, Dada-esque nature of the earlier issues. And, why did they save up all this great stuff for the last issue? You know what? I don't care. I don't care. If you're going to read this book, start with issue 11, then read issue 12, and you'll see what I mean. This was amazing. The Wildstorm number 7. You know how back when I reviewed Wildstorm number 6, I said that it had the best action scene I had ever seen in a comic book? Yeah, forget I said it. This issue now has the best action scene I have ever seen in a comic book. On top of that scene, this story is tightly scripted and it's enthralling. It introduces not only more mysteries, but it answers some of the old ones. The dialogue keeps us interested, and the action, my God, I cannot say enough about the action. And if I keep talking about it, I'll start to get redundant. The fact that we are still being introduced to new characters 7 issues in tells us how big the plans are for this series, and I seriously hope that Warren Ellis can keep all these balls in the air, because I'd be greatly disappointed if he craps out in the middle. And now to round up the scores. DC Comics had 2 1-star books, no 2-star books, 3 3-star books, 3 4-star books, and 3 5-star books. That gives them a total score of 38 points. I reviewed 11 issues from DC Comics this time for an average score of 3.45 points. Marvel Comics this time had 1 1-star book, 4 2-star books, 2 3-star books, 2 4-star books, and 2 5-star books. This gives them a total score of 33 points. I reviewed 11 issues from Marvel Comics for an average score of 3.0 points. So, once again, and probably to nobody's particular surprise, DC Comics has won the review. Congratulations, DC. But folks, what did you think about these comics? Was I right? Was I wrong? Was I, just completely full of it? Tell me why you think so in the comments below. If you like this video and you want to see more of them, click like and subscribe and the little notification bell in the corner so you don't miss any of our future videos. And if you feel like helping out, we've got a Patreon page and a VidMe page set up, and there are links below. Feel free to wander over and drop $1 in the till. But even if you don't do that, thanks for taking the time out to watch. We do appreciate it, and we hope to catch you next time. Thank you very, very much for watching.